On the Discord, we have a section labeled Match Analysis. And thank you to everyone who has sent in their competition footage through the Discord. And one of those people is Paul with the purple hair here, who goes by Ice Cream Jiu-Jitsu on Instagram and is a blue belt out of Elements Jiu-Jitsu in Germany. And what we're going to do in this video is basically copy the Wiltse brothers and break down Paul's competition footage. And please realize that Andrew is a world champion black belt and I am just a very average purple belt. But if you haven't seen his newer videos, you should go check them out because the format is pretty cool. And even though I'm not anywhere close to Andrew's level, I figured I would give it a shot and see what kind of feedback it gets. So if this video gets to 500 likes, I will know that you enjoy me breaking down your competition footage. And we'll keep making these videos with the Patreon members having first dibs. And there are still a large percentage of viewers that have not subscribed. So if you haven't already, take this moment to hit the subscribe button as it is free and it really helps out the channel a lot. Alright, so this is the first match of 2 that Paul sent in, and he starts it off with a beautiful takedown and settles into side control. As his opponent attempts to come up on a single leg, Paul does a great job of spinning to the back. But this is where things start to go a little south. Instead of trying to break his opponent down to a hip and working to improve your position from there, I think you get a little tunnel vision here, Paul, on connecting your hands in that seatbelt configuration. And you do eventually end up knocking your opponent down to a hip, but the problem is you're not in an athletic position either. What we want is a situation where we're athletic when our opponent is not, giving us the ability to capitalize on the position. But since we put ourselves in an unathletic position, we're not able to follow them as they get back up to their knees. So now our opponent's hips are completely free and we're still trying to chase that far arm instead of working back to control their hips, which leads to us falling off and going for a kimura out of desperation. And then we kind of go for a half-hearted triangle, which our opponent uses to try to pass our guard. But as they're coming around, Paul does a great job of taking advantage of all the space and using it to come out the back door and wrestle up. Now, this doesn't end up working out with Paul being on top, but it was a great demonstration of guard retention skills. And now we find ourselves in a front headlock situation and our opponent just tries to run around to our back without doing anything to monitor our arm, right? They should be using their knee, they could be using their hand, they could be using their head to prevent us from grabbing their leg, but they didn't do any of these. And Paul did a great job of capitalizing on that. Now, as we reset, our opponent goes into a pretty weak shot and we're able to sprawl heavy and go into a front headlock of our own. Now, from here, I would like to see an immediate guillotine threat to put a lot of pressure on our opponent. And as I work to defend the choke, we can use that opportunity to block their arm and work our way around to the back. But instead, we make the same error our opponent made and we try to just dive and run around to our opponent's back. But they do a good job of timing this and sit to guard. And their sit forces us to put our hand out on the mat, which tells me that our shoulder pressure from the front headlock was not on their neck the way it should be. It was more on their back, which allowed them to sit to guard easily and force us to disconnect. Now we find ourselves in a situation where our opponent has an underhook and they're coming up. And what we need to do is to make sure we cover the head either by spinning to their back the way Paul did previously or just covering their head with our body. But what we can't have is their head to be free where they can come up on a proper takedown. So now all we have saving us is our hand on the ground, which currently bears all of our weight. So we're not able to move that post and our opponent is very easily able to finish the takedown. So now we're on bottom and Paul mentioned in the Discord that he doesn't enjoy playing guard. But check this out, Paul. Here in this moment, you decided to go to guard. With your left leg here, you could pummel that in as a butterfly hook and use that butterfly hook to stand up. But instead, it goes around your opponent's back and you work your way back to close guard. So just realize going to guard is a choice and you do have the option of going to different positions, such as a butterfly guard that gives you more options when it comes to disengaging and standing up, or even better, snapping them down into a front headlock. But we chose to go back to guard, so now we find ourselves here and our opponent is playing a very defensive game while we're trying to go into our top lock, which is a great option from closed guard, but again, I think we have a little bit of tunnel vision on this attack. So instead of our right hand coming across and going on top of our opponent's arm, what we could do instead is bring it underneath and go into an arm drag grip and work to threaten our opponent's back. And that is kind of a big thing I picked up while watching the competition footage, is that there's not a lot of layers to the attacks. And I think that would be a very good thing for you to focus on to really improve your game. And here you dive your arm underneath your opponent's leg. And I don't know if you're using this for a flower sweep or to just get angle on your opponent to go into that armbar again. But I think committing to the flower sweep would have been a very good option. And if your opponent is able to defend that, you can use that to set up the transition to the armbar. But even if neither of these worked, your opponent's response was for them to reach forward and hug your head. They should not be able to get their arm back easily, but that's exactly what they do. You just kind of let them posture up and get their arm back. So again, just more layers to your attacks I think would really improve your performance. So now after playing for a little while in closed guard, our opponent decides to stand up. And we use this opportunity to shoot in on a takedown. And as our opponent wraps our neck in a guillotine, Paul, I think you do a really good job here of really addressing the legs and making sure you get to the appropriate side, as opposed to trying to address the grip on your neck. So great job there, and it leads to you settling back into side control and then spinning around to the back again beautifully and covering the hips. But again, we just get a little tunnel vision on going into that seatbelt grip and connecting our hands. So we're diving forward, our weight is way too far forward, we're falling off, and our opponent is nice enough to just kind of lay to their back and let us mount them. And he does a good job of immediately putting his hand on our knee. And we need to address this right away, whether it's underhooking the arm or just picking up the wrist and shooting our knee forward. We need to get his hand off of our knee. Now I know your adrenaline's going, you're probably exhausted at this point, but we can't let him have his hand on our knee for 15 seconds, which eventually allows him to escape to half guard. So now we're in half guard and our opponent has a deep underhook and they're on their side. If we had the underhook, we could use this opportunity to pass our opponent's guard relatively easily and accumulate even more points. But because they have the underhook, it allows them to recover their guard, and now we're here in a butterfly guard. And as they go to sit up, I would be diving on a body lock pass right now. But instead, we just kind of patty cake a little bit, and then we stand up, and then that's the end of the match. So overall, I think this was a really good match for you. And if it were me, I would focus my attention on front headlocks and my attacks from turtle, because it looks like you're someone who likes to wrestle quite a bit, either coming up from bottom or shooting on a takedown of your own. So these are positions that you're going to find yourself in quite a bit. Alright, so match 2 starts off with our opponent pulling guard, and Paul, I think you do a really good job of getting to your grips, but there's no conviction behind your grips. This arm positioning you have is great. It prevents your opponent from using their knee shield, and to me, it really facilitates a front step style of pass, because this grip makes it hard for your opponent to follow you and enter into your legs. But you just kind of sit here and chill for a bit, but then you work to another very nice grip here, which again prevents your opponent from using their knee shield and can allow you to get chest to chest and work your pass from there. But again, you're just kind of chilling, and then I can't really see what's happening over on this side with the hand fight. But with both your arms on the same side of your opponent's body, you are very vulnerable to having your back taken. But nothing ends up happening, life goes on, and we try to jump past our opponent's guard. They try kind of a half-hearted guillotine. And we eventually find ourselves in a situation where our opponent is sitting up again. And instead of going into a body lock pass, which would be my preferred choice, we decide to enter into an over-under pass. Now, I think over-under passes are a bit of a risky gambit, and the only time I find myself using them is after a half guard sweep. When you're coming up on top, you kind of find yourself in an over-under situation. But if given a choice, I would much prefer a body lock to an over-under pass, especially no gi. But nonetheless, here we are in our over-under pass, and we're trying to step our back leg around their foot instead of trying to step our front leg around our opponent's knee. The issue with trying to beat the foot first is that even if we do, like you do here, Paul, they're still able to push off us with their knee and recover their foot position. So now they've recovered their guard, and they're starting to threaten a kimura. A simple rule that'll stop a majority of the kimuras in their tracks is that if you're showing the back of your hand to your opponent, your elbow drifts away from your center line. If you turn your palm up, your elbow goes towards your center line. So whenever you're reaching, try to reach with your palm facing your opponent to pretty much eliminate the possibility of a kimura. But this is very hard to do from the over-under situation that we're in right now. And our opponent's able to lock up the kimura and ends up finishing the match. So this is a reason why I don't use the over-under pass as a primary strategy. but it's also something I haven't studied very much. So maybe your coach, if he's the one who is encouraging you to go down this path, maybe he has some tricks that can help prevent this problem. But at least you kind of know what the problem is and you can work to address it. I really appreciate you sending in the videos, Paul. I hope this analysis is helpful to you, as well as all the other people watching this video as well. And if it gets to 500 likes, I will continue to make content like this. It does take a lot of work, so maybe in the future it will be a Patreon member only perk, so I do make a little money off of it. But for now, I'm just happy to provide a resource that will hopefully help you improve your jiu-jitsu. So thank you all for the support, and we'll see you in the next one.